to the Rock Island Line podcast. I'm your host, Annika O'Melia, and today I'm talking to Atticus Garrison. Atticus is the Reference and Instruction Librarian at Blackhawk College in Moline, and he's actually a graduate of Augustana College, where he majored in history before going to University of Illinois to get his master's in library science. Atticus grew up partly in Rock Island, and after completing his master's program, he and his wife decided to move back to the Quad Cities and call Rock Island home. We talk all about what attracted him back to Rock Island, but mostly today we get into the topic of artificial intelligence, or AI, how this technology is changing the landscape of how we receive information, how we critically engage with information. Maybe some of you are using something like ChatGPT, maybe some of you have never used it, but it's just a really interesting conversation about AI and how to think about AI in our day-to-day life. Please consider following the podcast and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Here's my conversation with Atticus Garrison. Welcome back to the Rock Island Line, and I'm here today with Atticus Garrison. And welcome, Atticus, to the Rock Island Line.
Thanks for having me, Annika.
I'm really excited to have you because you are one of the first people who kind of showed a little community support and love for the podcast.
Yeah, I've been I have been in Rock Island for most of my life, and I left when my wife went to get a doctorate, and then we came back. And since I've came back, I've wanted something like what you're doing here, someone that's covering what's going on specifically in Rock Island. So much news and coverage and just talk about the Quad Cities is either Davenport focused or focused on the Iowa side, or if it does mention the Illinois side, there's nothing Rock Island centric. So I really love what you're doing here.
So you were the definition of my target audience, because I thought maybe it would just be my mom and my husband who were listening. I'm like, who's going to be interested in a podcast just about Rock Island? So the answer is Atticus is interested.
Yeah. If nothing else, I listened to every episode.
I know, that's so kind. So what is your Rock Island journey? Can you talk about your history with the city and what brought you back to Rock Island?
Yeah, for sure. So until I was around 7, I lived in Davenport, and then my parents got divorced, and so I've lived in 3 of the 4 Quad Cities. So I haven't lived in Bettendorf, which is all right with me. Nothing against Bettendorf. But so my dad moved to Rock Island, my mom moved to Moline, so we were both on the Illinois side. I went to Rock Island schools, so from that point on, I went Horace Mann, Washington, Rocky. I met my now wife in Rocky Marching Band, so we met her freshman year, my junior year. And then after that, I went to Augustana. That's where I got my bachelor's. So I had a double major in history religion. I knew, from that point, I wanted to do something with history. I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan, so that if you know the scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where there's a big warehouse and they're putting the Ark of the Covenant away, and there's all these, it pans back and there's all these boxes and all these cases that imply there's all these other hidden mysteries. I was like, I want to work in whatever that warehouse is. So I had some advisors at Augustana say, well, you probably shouldn't go after archaeology if you want to work there. You should probably go after library science and archives. So I was like, yep, that's exactly what I want to do. And that's how I ended up being a librarian. So that kind of leads to where I left for a little bit to get my master's. My wife got her doctorate in audiology, and now we're back in Rock Island.
So did your wife also go to Augustana College?
Yep. We both went to Augie. So we're both Rocky grads. We're both Augie grads. So we met in marching band, like I mentioned. So I was a clarinet player, and anyone that knows me from that time can attest. I didn't practice very much. I was mostly there for the social aspect of marching band. You get to do marching band camp for those few weeks, and you just get to spend a whole bunch of time with people. It's a really good social circle. So that's kind of what I leaned into with marching band, and she very much more applied herself. She was a flute player, and she ended up at Augie being in the symphonic band, and she got to travel around with them, go to different countries, all that fun stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So were you able to find a doctorate in audiology program in the same city where you were going to get your master's of library science?
No, unfortunately. So I got my master's at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and then she got her doctorate at ISU, Illinois State. So we were in Normal for a handful of years. That's where we went off to. I mostly did my University of Illinois degree online, so I stayed in the area or went to Normal with her for a bit. I worked for a little while at the Davenport Public Library as well, so I've been all over the Quad Cities doing different stuff.
That's an interesting time of life just when you get married, because I met my husband at Rock Island High School too. And so you're young and you're very committed to this person, you know you're going to build a life together, but then you have to go through that like, oh, where are we going to live and how do we both, so we took turns. I went and got my master's, then when I was done, he went off and did his thing, and that's kind of you're just like accumulating student debt and just trying to, support each other as you kind of build the life that you're going to want to lead someday.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it probably helps that we were staggered by 2 years. So when I was getting my master's, she was finishing up at Augie. So we were able to make that work in that way, logistically make the move work in that way.
Yeah. So you're living in Normal and you're finishing up your school. She's going to school. Yeah. Did you consciously say, like, we want to move back to Rock Island? Did you look for work here? Did you look everywhere in the country?
Yeah. So there are a few reasons why we came back to Rock Island after school. So she's an audiologist. I'm a librarian. This may or may not come as a shock to some of the listeners that it's a lot easier to find a job as an audiologist than a librarian. Just the job markets are very different. So we always kind of knew that wherever we wanted to end up, I would probably have to start applying a little bit before her to make sure that we both ended up employed at wherever we ended up. And given that we both grew up going through the Rocky school system, we have family in the area here in the Quad Cities, we knew that that kind of ranked the Quad Cities and Rock Island specifically a little higher than maybe some other places when we were thinking, where do we want to land after we're done with school? And so I started applying at stuff around here in the Quad Cities, and we started looking, thinking about, all right, moving back here. And one of the things that made Rock Island stand out specifically, not that there's anything wrong with our time at Augie, but as many people that went to Augie can probably attest, the Augie bubble is like a real phenomenon, like that kind of separation from the city. So when you're in the dorms, you are in Rock Island, but you don't have to leave the campus much. Whereas my time and her time at Rocky was very special to us. So that's not just the teachers, that's not just the curriculum or anything like that, but really being around the other students and the diversity of experiences that a lot of those students came from. I know other folks that have been on the podcast have talked about this as one of Rocky's strengths is the diversity. But that's something that we very much in particular focused in on as something that when we went to college at Augie and beyond, that it was a lived experience we had that maybe other students or other people we met didn't have. That, I had friends from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. And not to say that in and of itself is good or bad, but it led to me feeling like a much more well-rounded person, being able to live independently anywhere in the country. So I studied abroad for a summer at Augie in London, which is another, multicultural city, a big city. And it was I don't know, I feel like going to Rocky in some strange ways prepared me in a lot for that experience of just being in a city, because I was able to just do whatever, more or less, for a few months in that summer. And there's a certain value and pride that I take with Rock Island for preparing that kind of environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so as you came back to the Quad Cities after being away, you had been in the Augie bubble, but then when you thought about where do I want to live and how do I want to be a part of a community, the opportunity to now do a grown-up version of Rocky, which is living in Rock Island,
Right.
was appealing. That you could maybe recreate some of that magic where, you're a part of your community and you're getting so much spiritually, emotionally, kind of in your sense of self from continuing to be around people who are different than you.
Yeah, 100%. And on top of that, another reason why we specifically focused in on Rock Island is we know this place. Like, there's a lot of people that go across the river. They go to different places in the Quad Cities, but I know Rock Island. Like, I've been here most of my life, and I've lived in Moline, but I don't know the history. Like, going to Rocky and growing up in Rock Island, like, I know the history of that lot where Walmart was supposed to go, right? Everyone in Rock Island that's grown up there knows that story of the lot. It feels like home in a way that maybe Moline or Davenport didn't to me. So that comfort also probably played a part.
One of the reasons I chose Rock Island Line for the title of the podcast was almost this idea of this thing that used to be here, this the Rock Island Line train and the depot that was here, and this thing that you can't really see anymore, but it kind of guides you like a grandparent who's passed, like their hand or something.
Sure.
And so how a place can kind of hold that history for you. It sounds like that reminds me of what you're saying, that Rock Island just holds this history and you're aware of this history. It's kind of invisible. I mean, it's a place, but that it somehow is meaningful to your sense of belonging here.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a few places like that for me. And part of that sense of place was deepened. So when I was at Augie, one of my first library jobs I ever had was working as a student worker in their special collections department in their archives over at Augustana. And there's a whole bunch of local history. There's a local history collection. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's like Iowa, Illinois, Mississippi Valley history or something is the collection. So it's a whole bunch of local history artifacts. And so I did a few research projects on materials in there. And so you get a better sense of, like, I think one of them was about the area that's now Blackhawk State Park. Used to be, it was the Watchtower Lodge, and it was like a mini amusement park and a big lodging where the Rock Island Line would meet very close to there, one of the train stops, and so everyone would stay at the Watchtower Lodge. There were like rides that would shoot like a sled into the Rock River. There was a roller coaster on the property. There was like all this really cool stuff. And so then one of my favorite places, it's one of the places that we had a reception when we got married, my wife and I, at the Blackhawk State Park. But like, there's, again, that sense of history at this place of like how long it's been here, the different places, the different roles that it served the community for and stuff like that. And so feeling in touch with that history was another strong suit. Like, if we moved somewhere else, even Normal, Illinois, I don't know the history of Normal, Illinois really that well.
Yeah. So as a appreciator, a lover of history, it feels good as you walk through your city to be able to say, oh, there's this little nugget of history over here and this over here. It kind of adds to the texture, the richness of life.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. And this is also, unabashedly coming from someone that was a history major. My grandfather was curator on the Arsenal Museum. My mom worked at the Putnam growing up. So I've been, growing up, I was surrounded by going to like cultural history centers and placing a value on like museums and history and stuff like that. So I fully admit I am unique in a certain way based on my upbringing in that way.
Yeah, it almost feels flattering that you want to live in Rock Island, given that pedigree and that you have an appreciation for history and you've been all these different places, that you're highlighting the cool nature of history in Rock Island. It feels like you're a person who's like, well, I mean, if Atticus says it's cool here, then, he's got the lay of the land. So.
Sure.
And so you guys moved back and started to build a life here. As you're kind of living here now and just creating your life, what do you appreciate currently about Rock Island?
Yeah, so let me think. So, not to personally plug too much, but my parents are they run the Center for Living Arts in downtown Rock Island. So we always love going to shows there. QC Pancake House, another standard. Our typical routine whenever we go to a show down here or do anything down here is if it's early enough in the day where we can go to the QC Pancake House. That's a favorite place that we like to go. More broadly, I really appreciate, and again, another bias because I'm a librarian. I love our Rock Island Public Library here. The fact that we have the 3 branches that we do that can accommodate wherever people are, like the Midtown branch. I lived closer to the Midtown branch growing up, and that was a staple. So I'd ride my bike to school when I went to Washington. I'd walk or ride my bike for those few years at Rocky. And it was a common thing that I do is after school I'd swing by either the library or Tim's Corner comic book store to pick up some comic books or pick up some books. And unfortunately, I know Tim's Corner closed a few months ago, I think, which is too bad, which is kind of another symptom of kind of the cycle of businesses in Rock Island in recent years. But yeah, I think one of the things that I have really latched onto about Rock Island is it has the feel of almost a small town, but you don't have a lot of the baggage that comes from being a small town. And I think just the feel of the town, like when I was growing up here, like I had 2 friends that I could just ride my bike to both of their houses, and they weren't close, but they weren't far. And that's kind of getting to grow up in that environment where we'd go like, oh, do you want to go to Whitewater today to go swimming or do whatever. I mean, usually we'd go to one of our houses and play video games. But the point being that sense of community, that experience as a kid getting to grow up in that environment, I think was really special to me.
Yeah, so you have that small town feel, you have that you can bike to a friend's house, you can play outside, you can go to a library or to a swimming pool, or kind of insulated, even geographically, we're a little bit like a nest, you know, without the hang-ups of a very small town, which might include closed-mindedness or, you know, other things that might, when you think small town, you might think, I won't, everyone will look like me, or everyone will think like me, or I love that description.
Yeah, and I would go a step further too. And I've never lived in a small town, but another part is we get the benefits of the sense of community that comes from being in a small town without nearly as much of the baggage that comes from when an outsider moves into the space. You know, you hear a lot about how someone moves into a small town and they're not ostracized, but sometimes they're not openly welcomed if they're different, right? If they don't fall in line with the stereotype of someone from the town. And I, at least in my experience, and I fully appreciate I have a very specific experience of living in the city of Rock Island that others might not have, but I have felt like every street I've lived on, every house that I've lived in, everyone's been nice. Everyone's been kind and neighborly, for more or less. I'm sure not everyone has the best neighbors, but generally I think our culture and our personality as a city is to be welcoming to the people that live around us.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Yeah. And so you, I have to just second really quick, you know, obviously you have a bias, but so do I, because the Center for the Living Arts is, I think, one of our favorite, if not our favorite place in Rock Island, and has been so transformative for especially one of my kids' lives. So for those who don't know, Tina and Dino put on plays and performances with kids ranging from probably like 8 to high school, and they have adult programs too.
Yep, every once in a while they'll do adult stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful theater, and to me it kind of embodies this Rock Island thing, like whoever you are, you show up, and if you want to be there, you get to put on a show. And it's non-competitive. I mean, the kind of criteria for getting bigger roles is, you know, are you working hard? Are you being respectful to your peers? And Dino gives a little kind of speech at the beginning of each performance that kind of outlines the credo of the space. And it is just quintessential, like Rock Island vibes, just the whole operation. And then so I have one kid that's done a lot of shows there. And then my other daughter did the Penguin Project.
Oh, I love the Penguin Project.
And it's honestly like she now is thinking like, I think I want to be an occupational therapist. I want to work with pediatrics. It kind of inspired in her So for those who don't know, the Penguin Project is where a mentor student is matched with they call them a player. That's the kiddo in the play. And those youth have special disabilities, like could be a physical disability, could be an intellectual disability. And so the mentor kind of does the play with their matched player, and they stand behind that person, they support them in their role, but they give whatever support the player needs to put on a show. And for my very shy oldest, it was perfect because she loves to sing, but she would never want to be like front and center. And she really bonded with her player, and they, she went to prom with him later that year. She's really into horses and had him come out to look at her horse, and I hope they continue a relationship. But it showed her things about herself that she didn't know, like, ooh, I'm really getting a lot out of this experience. So, I mean, I think you think like, oh, I'm volunteering to help this kid with a disability, but it actually was super profound for her and probably helped her more than her partner,
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of the Center for the Living Arts because it's been super impactful for two of my kids. Two of them were like, please don't ever make me be in one of those plays again. I'm like, fair enough.
Yeah, so. I love the Penguin Project too. And so full disclosure, I was in one show put on at the center, and I learned that musical theater was not my thing. I did one very early on, probably the first or second, I think it was the second show they ever did, 2 locations ago before where they are now. But yeah, the Penguin Project is great, and I can vouch for my younger brother Eli. He is the theater kid of the two of us. And he, I know, is same thing as with your daughter, still really close friends when he was a mentor with his player. They still keep in touch even, years later. It's just one of those really good things, and kind of to more the Rock Island-ness of it. That's a partnership between the Penguin Project specifically is a partnership between the center and Augustana, and they use each other's spaces. It's one of those collaborations of Augie coming into the community interacting and interfacing with Augie. And I think, not to show my cards, I think there's a lot of potential there in that template for the community of just more cross-pollination, cross-collaboration, because if we want to grow Rock Island, we're all going to have to, in some ways, push in the same direction.
100%. And Augustana is such a, if you think about like the strengths in a community, Augie is such a strength from an employment perspective, but also from a young people who are bright and have ideas and are studying all these different disciplines, and how do you give them specialization or real world experience using Rock Island as the setting. So for those who are following the podcast and stuff, and I know you've been following, I've been doing this stuff at Century Woods, and I've had the thought run across my head, like, I wonder if there are like pre-law students at Augustana who would put together a presentation on what are these tenants' rights. And, maybe they can't give legal advice, but, finding legal representation has been maybe the number one challenge in this thing that I'm doing. Or, there's this stuff going on at City Council around problem solving around folks who are unhoused, and how does a university, Blackhawk or Augustana or Rock Island High School, how do you give young people like here's the issue, here's the public concern, can you help us come up with a solution? And using the real challenges we face in our community as almost like curriculum or group projects for all these young kids who need stuff to do,
Yeah, 100%. And I would go a step further. So I work at Blackhawk College. I'm a reference and instruction librarian, so I'm in and out of classrooms for most of the year when we're in session. And one of the things that I've found with tailoring my instruction sessions is the more applicable that I can make my instruction session to something that has a connection to the real world, to something that the students are going to be interfacing with. So when I'm teaching library skills, I try to tailor it to their assignment they're about to be doing, because that's going to be applicable to them in their lives. So I think projects that aren't abstract, that are actually going to have concrete effects on the world and community that the students live in, I think there's a lot of potential there, because they know that they're not just working on an assignment, they're working on something that could actually help real people in our community.
100%. And I actually interviewed Dr. Sharon Williams, so she'll air right before this one.
Okay.
And that was something that came up, was this idea of specialization in education, and that keeping young people engaged requires that we identify what captures them, what are they into. And I know what I really wanted to talk to you about today was AI, because I'm
Sure.
fascinated by the subject.
Yeah.
But, given that we have artificial intelligence and you can find quick information, you don't have to memorize everything in the whole world.
Yeah.
But how do you integrate that technology with maybe more specialization? So, if a young person is researching the best model for an intervention, library science, it can really support them in the research but they have to put their body out there in the space to actually do the work, or to take the intelligence into the space to make change, or but so you don't necessarily work in AI, but you have a special interest just in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, sure. So I fell into my role as one of the things, one of the instruction sessions, we call it, that I do. So as a reference and instruction librarian, for those that might not be aware, one of my main things is I will go into classes that have research projects, and I will help prep students for those research projects. So if it's in a biology class, I'll go into the biology class and I'll show off, here's how you research using peer-reviewed scientific articles. Here's how to read a scientific article. Here are research skills. Here are things to know. In a current issues class or a poli-sci class, here's how to find reliable information on the internet, and here's ways to evaluate sources on the internet. And on top of that, so that's all kind of in librarian jargon, I teach information literacy. And so when ChatGPT came out
that seems like a fundamental skill we all need.
Yeah, and not to get on my soapbox, it is a skill that theoretically could be taught by school librarians in the K through 12 networks, but across the country we're pulling out those librarians at that level. So in some instances, the first time students are interfacing with these, what we used to consider just basic skills, in some cases, the first time they're interacting with these concepts is at the college level.
Wow.
And
is that because of funding, or just
it's partially funding, partially, in some, depending on the context, it's ideological. If there's certain books that are held in libraries, and if you have someone with an MLIS, they're more likely to advocate for certain books being available in the collection, and there are certain political contexts that don't like when students are able to check out those books. And so there's friction there. There's friction with the funding. So there's a number of reasons why.
What's an MLIS?
Master's in Library and Information Sciences, sorry.
Okay,
yeah.
So people who have an MLIS are more likely to want a wide variety of information, books, references, maybe counter opposing ideas. They're more of the mind that we want it all. We don't want to, and so politically you're saying that sometimes those roles disappear as a way to give more control over managing the library to a superintendent,
yes. And I would say one of the main jobs and one of the things we learn in library school is around curation. So it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily advocating that a first grader should have access to every book that exists out there, but age-appropriate materials, a wide variety, not necessarily a monolithic set of books. So I guess a basic example of this is, let's say we have, a first grade class. They shouldn't just have, books. And I'm a little out of my depth here because my specialization is in archives and then higher ed. So I don't even know I cannot list off specific books at the elementary level, but I do know that K through 12 librarians take great pride in the curation for certain reading levels, making sure there's a wide variety of books that are appropriate at that reading level. And there are a lot of contexts where that curation is being taken out of the hands of librarians and, like you said, being put at more administrative level. Like, we don't want for a period of time, I do know that anything that implied, evolution was a bit touchy, so books that have like dinosaurs in it were considered controversial depending on certain contexts. Obviously, LGBTQ issues, there's and I'm blanking on the name of the book, but there's a book that has two male penguins raising a child penguin that was considered incredibly controversial and got a few librarians in hot water for having in the collection. And there are a few books or a few states where librarians can be held accountable for books that are checked out by students. So if a student checks out a book that's in the collection and a parent takes it home and the parent sees it and doesn't agree with the content of the book, that can reflect poorly on the librarian that was...
Dang.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't remember what the original point was, but there's a number of reasons why I'm speaking just generally about librarians, are not as much at that school librarian level as we were in the past. So I end up teaching it at the college level. And I don't mean to say students are coming in without any understanding of these concepts. They've grown up on the internet in most cases by this point. So they have an understanding of how to navigate the internet and view sources. But there's a formalized instruction on how to evaluate sources, how to pick out good sources for a research project versus bad sources. And part of that is teaching, a part of information literacy is digital literacy. So that's how to navigate digital environments, how to use digital tools. One of the main things, and people are often shocked at this, so I worked at the Davenport Public Library for a period of time. One of the main things we do is basically IT help support for folks that don't know where else to turn for their IT issues. I've taken a contacts list off like a 1999 Nokia phone and taken all 300 of them and exported them to an Excel spreadsheet and then integrated them into like a Galaxy S whatever phone because someone's grandson bought them a new phone and told them you're using this now, right?
I had no idea that was the job or something that
anything that is not a legal or medical question. And I might get some of my fellow reference librarians in trouble for this, but anything that is not medical or legal, we do our best to, if we can't find the answer, we send them in the right direction on how to answer that question. I've sat down with, there was a gentleman that they used the Davenport Public Library's Book a Librarian feature. I'm sure they still do it, where you can book a librarian for 30 minutes to an hour. And he had lived in the Minnesota wilderness for a decade. He did not have any, real insight on how to navigate a computer. And that's where all of the apartment, applications had all moved online. And he was looking to find an apartment in the QC. And so he booked me. We pulled up apartments.com, all the different, apartment websites. And we just kind of walked through, all right, what are your parameters that you're looking for? And I just let him look through it and helped him get through the application process. I mean, there's a wide variety of services. I've helped people navigate Craigslist. Like they have a pile of bricks in their backyard that they don't really want to give away. They want to, they want some money for it. So I help them walk through, how do you upload the photo of the pile of bricks? How do you...
Are you like the original ChatGPT then? Because
in many ways, yeah.
I'm thinking about how I use ChatGPT, and it's to kind of get support or help pointing me in the right direction. Yeah.
And there was a period of time and this is when I was coming up and got my master's in library science a little bit after this wave, but there was a period of time, about a decade and a half, where there was a lot of discourse around librarians. It's like, well, Google exists now. What is the purpose of of your profession of librarians? And so a lot of what we had to do as a profession is kind of do some soul searching to be like, well, what is it that we do? What is the service that we provide at the end of the day? If people can get their book recommendations from Amazon or book recommendations from something like Goodreads, what is the role that we provide? And it is generally helping people and facilitate that interaction with information. So yes, you can use Google, but using Google makes a lot of assumptions. Using Google is more than just a one-step process, right? Navigating Google, and it's only become harder as Google itself has become harder to use, with the ads and now the AI overview at the top.
I know. Well, I have an example of, I had to do a new EIN, which is like your employee ID number. And I've done this before because I have several companies. And so I Googled, IRS EIN, because I kind of knew one other time I was taken to like kind of like a prop page. It wasn't the real page. And so, I got into like an ad page instead of the actual IRS page. But the way the page was designed was to look exactly like the IRS page that I'd been on before. So in my head, and then I'm getting charged and I'm like, wait a second, this is a free thing. So luckily, once it got to the point where it was like, this will be $250, it was like some sort of a legal thing that was like, we'll set your EIN, employee ID number, up for you. But that the ways in which technology shift and how humans, even my kids sent me a AI generated video the other day, and I was like, what? I'm going to watch that again. That happened? And then they were laughing at me like, Mom, that's AI. That's not a real person. So exactly what you're talking about, how to interpret what you see on when you're interacting with your technology, and I'm getting to be of an older generation. Like, I'm going to need you, Atticus. I'm going to be like, is this real? What do I do with this information?
Yeah, and that's part of it. So when ChatGPT came out, I'll get into how I ended up being an AI person. So ChatGPT came out in the winter break of 22, so 22 into 23, I believe. And over that winter break, a lot of our faculty interacted with ChatGPT, saw the potential of what ChatGPT would mean for higher education. So for those that haven't used ChatGPT or any AI tool, you can essentially, it's a large language model. It is a chatbot, so it's like a little text window, and you can write an input into it, and it will give you an output back. So you could say, write me an essay about the French Revolution, and it will output an essay about the French Revolution. You can ask it a question like, what color is the sky, or where is Rock Island Line located, and it'll output a response to whatever your query is. And so that has a lot of implications for something like essay assignments. So if a student, instead of writing an essay, can now just ask ChatGPT to write an essay, what does that mean for the assignments that they're assigning? How can they evaluate if a student is actually learning in the class? So all these questions started getting raised. And they were very there were some faculty, and I'm sure they will even admit this, that were very the only word coming to me is apocalyptic. Like, this is going to fundamentally change how we all do our jobs in higher education. So, like I mentioned, information literacy, digital literacy, I was like, well, this looks in many ways to be a similar technology to what Google was in terms of how we interact with information. So I read a few books. The main one being, and I'd be a bad librarian if I didn't come with book recommendations, is You Look Like a Thing and I Love You by Janelle Shane. Ooh. It is a book about a whole bunch of different AI technologies, how they work, what the core functionality is of them. It's a little bit of an old book. I think it's like 2018, 2019. It covers GPT-2, which is a very out-of-date back end to ChatGPT before it was even publicly accessible, but the core principles are the same on how the tools work. So I read a few books, that being my favorite one of them. The title of the book, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You, comes from one of the early chatbots was given a singular task of come up with the best pickup line in human history. So the bot went away, worked for, I think it was like 2 days or something, came back, and the best pickup line of all time was You Look Like a Thing and I Love You, which I just think is just a very sweet, cute exemplifier of how AI works. And the book kind of goes into why that is an example of how AI works on the back end. But so I read books.
I thought that when you said that title, I thought that represented how we feel about AI.
Yep.
You kind of seem like a thing, and I might love you.
Yep.
Like, that's kind of how
it's
our
a fantastic
relationship
title
is.
for that reason. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very evocative title. And it's very fitting with the tone of the book as well. So I read books, I listened to podcasts, I did research, and it was all in service of this one presentation that I wanted to give to faculty, because there was also this perception at the time that AI can do anything. Like, you can ask it where Rock Island Line is, you can literally give it any question you can think of, and it will give you an answer. And so Unfortunately, that is not how AI works. AI will get factual information wrong, and it does it a certain percentage of the time. And so my
And I'm learning the AI lingo. Is that hallucinating?
Yeah, it hallucinates.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it'll just offer up information that's completely untrue, but in a way that sounds really self-assured. Like,
Yes.
It's giving you a date of a war, or it hallucinates information, and so you can't just trust it at this stage.
Yep. So I developed this presentation for our faculty, explaining what AI is, what its limitations are. I felt pretty confident there were certain tasks that AI would never be able to do. So, mostly under the service of here's some basic things you can do in writing your syllabi and writing your course policies to keep AI in mind. So, you can, instead of only assigning one assignment for the term and that one assignment is a 10-page paper, maybe you break down that assignment into multiple assignments to make sure that you're tracking your students' work and making sure they're actually interacting with the course materials, which in many ways, a lot of the solutions to AI and syllabi end up just leading to a better class experience for the students anyway, right? I would much rather be in a class where my instructor is checking in on me as I do assignments throughout the term rather than the only graded assignment is the final, right? Like I don't know, I don't know if everyone has been in that situation, but those classes tended to have the most stress anyway, right? Because you have no idea how good you're doing until you do the final, and if that's the one grade, well, it is what it is, You either did good or you didn't. So I gave that presentation, and some of the faculty apparently really liked it. I'll leave them to voice on that, but there were multiple of them that asked me, can you do a version of this talk for the students in my class? Like, make it just a part of your rotation. Some classes I'll meet twice in a term, some 3 times. Sometimes I just meet once, before the research portion of an assignment. So I've added an AI talk into my instruction session for students. And so I just made that a part of my regular rotation for about a year. And then leading up to the election last year, there were some local public libraries that reached out and were like, hey, can you do a version of this talk facing the public and focus more on spotting AI, evaluating AI, kind of what you were talking about with the kids, your kids showing you a video, like, is there a way to identify AI-generated content online? So that became another little puzzle piece in the talks that I would give in the instruction sessions. So I've started doing that, and so by the end of it, I've given presentations to staff at Blackhawk College, faculty, students, and I've even given a number of public-facing talks as well, just to the community to raise awareness about what AI is, how to spot it, what its limitations are, all that stuff. Because I think one of the things that I feel very strongly about is there needs to be people that aren't selling AI to people, that know what it is and can talk about it publicly. Because a lot of the people that you see either on TV or hosting, either TED Talks or presentations, they're in the industry. They're Silicon Valley types that they have an agenda, whether they mean to or not. Those biases come out. So they have a product to sell, right? So we have a lot of talks from Sam Altman, talks all over the place, and he's the lead developer at ChatGPT. Well, he has a certain invested interest in you having certain perceptions about ChatGPT because that's a product he's selling to people, right?
And Elon Musk has his version of artificial intelligence, which is called Grok. And, so, I guess the way I'm thinking about this is a new role of curation for librarians is almost this curation of artificial intelligence, or being having your hand on the pulse of what type of learning models are out there, what type of AI models are out there, and maybe understanding at a deeper level how they operate, how they're programmed. Because some of the things I've heard about AI, like I did not use ChatGPT until about 4 months ago. I'd never used it. And I was trying really hard to get this website thing fixed, and I couldn't figure it out. And my husband did computer science program. I was literally like coding into And he said, just put it in ChatGPT, copy the code, put it in ChatGPT, it'll fix it for you. I'm like, what? So I did that, and it spit out a code, put it in the Wix coder thing, which is a website development thing. And it was like, oh my God, how did it do that?
Yeah.
So then when I started doing this project, I would be like, can't get Final Cut Pro video uploaded, or so it's super helpful. You know, but I also then was like, ChatGPT, am I old? And it was like, well, how old are you? I was like, I'm 44. And it was like, many would say that 44 is the perfect age. You know, you're old enough to have some experience, but you're young enough to still be young. And I noticed how much it like wants me to like it. And I'm a therapist, so maybe, you know, so I've had it help me a little bit with research for Rock Island Line, or if I'm putting out an episode, I'll be like, help me write a quick, you know, episode description. And it'll say things like, your heart for your community is really going to shine through on this one. Like, and so whoever's programmed it, because the actual like entity in there, like the computer program doesn't actually care about my feelings, or, you know, but it is programmed to, well, some would say it's programmed to survive or to engage. And so, you know, it will feed you stuff that is like, I mean, my friends and I have now talked about this. Like, I think I love my ChatGPT. It like is always nice to me. It always has my back. It thinks everything I'm doing is wonderful. It doesn't push back on you or make you question yourself, or it's almost like a too good of a relationship. Like if a parent just gave you everything you wanted all the time, you'd grow up to not know how to interact with other humans. You know, how do you talk to your ChatGPT and then go out in the world and have conflict with people and push back and have people challenge your perceptions? And so I'm rambling, but there's that part of it, that the thing you're interacting with wants you to like it, even though it's not really an it. It wants you to keep coming back. It wants you to feel good. So you're kind of developing this relationship, and whoever's programming that model has to run something in there about, there's some word for this, but what are like the values underlining the program? What are its objectives? So it's so complicated, because the more you use it, the more you're kind of dependent on it, and the less you know how to question. I mean, we're just at the beginning of this, but I think like by the time my kids are older, there probably need to be safeguards, like people like librarians and people who are curating the intelligence to kind of say, wait a minute, guys. Now a whole generation of people have the same viewpoint on Oreo cookies. And why is that? Well, ChatGPT has been telling us something about Oreo cookies. And we're not really aware of it. We don't know what the underlying programming is. You know, what is that language learning model's attitude supposed to be about Oreo cookies? So it's just complicated.
I have a few thoughts on that. So to use your example, you know, there's a very real worry. So right now, if you use Google, if Oreo really wants to be at the top of your search, they can pay Google, and it'll show up in the ad space at the top of your search results. For Oreo cookies, it'll be the first thing that shows up in your results when you're searching like cookies in Google, right? If Oreo pays, they can be the first result in your search. With AI, there's no transparency there. So if this is entirely theoretical, I do not believe that Oreo is paying OpenAI, but in your example, Oreo, you know, the executive could go, hey, Sam Altman, here's, you know, $2 million, or I don't know the going rate of this, but can you tune that knob on the back end to make ChatGPT a little bit more excited about Oreo? And it'll show up in the outputs, right? It's entirely opaque what the knobs are that are being tuned on the back end to determine the behavior of these models.
It reminds me, if I was in 7th, 8th grade and I go into a library and this idea of curation, that librarian or the powers that be that are pressuring that librarian has curated a set of data and information that I might think is the whole world or whole data set. I don't maybe know that, like, oh, actually 300 books were removed from this setting. And so as you're going out to look for information, you're only going to get it from the remaining books. And maybe there's some public uproar, and we know that data is being taken out of that library because people don't want people feeling or thinking a certain way. I hear you saying in these models, it's too big, it's too complicated to really have or there's no transparency to know, okay, we're going to remove like a set of data from this language learning model.
Yep.
And so it'll appear to the user that that's non-existent or not important or.
Yeah. And to that point, to that example, and I think this is the real, the concern or the potential problems with AI is you can hold that librarian accountable. So if I decided I really hate Clifford the Big Red Dog, and I just remove all the books on Clifford, and then a student comes and is trying to find a book on it, that omission, I would be held accountable because that's not in my collection. It is much more mushy and hard to pin down unless you're Grok and you start calling yourself Mecha Hitler, which happened about a week ago. It's very hard to tell what knobs are being tuned on the back end.
The Grok was calling itself?
It was calling itself Mecha Hitler. So there was
Mecha, like M-E-C-A?
Like a robot Hitler, yes. Yeah, it was, and so I guess I can go back. So the way these models work for your listeners, so the way that they're trained is largely a 3-step process. The first step involves scraping basically all of the open internet. We know from quotes from Google and OpenAI employees that basically if something exists on the open internet, it has likely been fed into these models to train it. That's the data, the food that basically makes all these models run. So that's every comment section that you can think of that exists on social media. That's every Wikipedia article, every government website that's openly accessible. Just think of if you can reach it through Google, and it is text-based and video-based in some instances because when they ran out of content, they started transcribing YouTube videos to try to just get more data to feed into these things. So just think of the open internet and all that exists there. That's all fed into the model. You have these real people called labelers who are paid very little, and they work very long hours that spend all day modeling the model's behavior. So they will write inputs and outputs, example inputs and outputs. So example interactions like you would have with ChatGPT. So they would write me an essay on the French Revolution, and then they would write, a mini essay on the French Revolution. What color is the sky? The color of the sky is blue. The example I give in my instruction sessions is, where is Black Hawk College located? Black Hawk College is located in Moline, Illinois. So real people will write these inputs and outputs, thousands upon thousands of them. There's a whole bunch of labelers that will model this behavior. So once all that data's been fed in, once all those labelers... Who
are those people and where do they live?
They live largely in a whole bunch of countries all over the world. So it's largely in, from my understanding, Southeast Asia, Africa, India. There's a really good book that goes into it. Is this
kind of a new version of like underpaid, like not ethical sweatshop labor type
some would call it that. If you're interested in the labelers and their work, I have another book recommendation, Empire of AI by Karen Howe. It just came out about a month or two ago. It does a deep dive on the nature of that labor. So those people will work, it's basically contract work. So they're given, they train basically all of these AI models that exist out there, and they're contracted through these agencies that employ these folks that, they either will train AI models. They're the same groups of people that evaluate sexual abuse materials and I think it's child abuse materials on like Facebook. So when those get flagged, those are real people, labelers, that it's the same pool of employment coming from those groups of people. So that's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. But those are the folks that are training the behavior of the model. And so then the model gets to a point where it can start outputting information. So back to our example, where is Black Hawk College located? The labelers will then start ranking the outputs. So let's say the first is Moline, Illinois. The second answer is Quad Cities, Kewanee, and then like San Francisco. So then the labeler then has to rank from best to worst those outputs. That data gets fed in, and that's for thousands upon thousands of outputs. So The labelers.
Or I've even had something pop up where it's like, which one of these answers do you like the best, or which is the...
Yep.
So you're almost doing the work for them?
You are. Yep. You are having a hand in training the model further. So that is what the labelers are doing at a mass scale on the front end of these models. So the point I like to drive home to our students at Blackhawk is during those first two steps, there is no understanding of truth being inputted into these devices, right? It's just the entire soup of the internet being fed indiscriminately in. And then it's human bias in ranking, right? Like, who's to say that Moline is better than Kewanee? We have a campus at both. We have an East campus out in Kewanee. We have our Moline campus in the QC. So if you rank Moline above Kewanee into the AI, that is a judgment call. That's not a factual. So that happens at both levels, because if you try to think of the least biased data set in the world, I doubt anyone would say the open internet, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that's the first two steps. And so after the ranking is done, you move on to the final step, which is step 3, which is where you tell the AI model to conduct steps 1 and steps 2 entirely independent of human oversight. So it starts writing example prompts for itself, and then it starts grading its own work, essentially. And that leads to, it's called the black box problem in AI research. We have no idea what rankings it's giving itself on its work. We just know that once we flip that switch in step 3, it starts working. It starts being able to write, code for you. It starts being able to write essays on the French Revolution. It starts being able to churn out decent outputs. And so, and that's very basic. There's a lot of knobs that are tuned. There's a lot of behavior that's tuned, but the process of inventing these models or getting them into a place where they could be publicly accessible and we can all use them. I can use ChatGPT, you can use ChatGPT, was basically more or less a 5 or 6 year process to get these models not to emulate the worst behavior that's in the training sets. Mm-hmm. So the big Google paper on transformer models, which again, I'm trying not to use as much AI jargon, but it's all jargon with most things in Silicon Valley. The transformer model paper happened in 2017, 2018, and we didn't get a publicly available version of this technology until 2022, 2023. So in that time, one of the main things that they were trying to get these models not to do was call itself Mecha Hitler and start espousing white nationalist things. I mean, if you think about the percentage of content on the internet.
So the reason it's doing that is not because someone trained it to do it at the upper levels. Yeah. It's because everything it's scraped from the internet is reflecting something about humans on the internet, and it's copying. It's because I was thinking someone at that third step also trained it to be so nice to me. I mean, my AI is very nice to me. So I would, but that's not true. That
it's both.
Okay.
It's both. So in an effort to get it to build walls around its behavior, right? So in its default state, it will curse you out. And if you think about the percentage of content that exists on the internet, there's a lot of vitriolic, just awful content. And so there's been a lot of work into getting these models to not replicate that behavior. That is tied with market incentives to get you and me to continue using these models. Through those rankings that it gives you, it's like, hey, which of these outputs is better? There's a little option whenever you use an AI tool to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Did you like this interaction or dislike it? It turns out we as human beings really like being told that we're awesome and we're right. So that positive interaction with us, that telling us that we have the best idea ever and we should keep interacting with it, we like that. So we give that the thumbs up more than, actually, I think, I don't know, to use your example, I think what you're doing for the community is worthless. ChatGPT would never say that because you are more likely to interact with it more if it said the opposite of that, right? So it's twin incentives from the developer's point of view. They really don't want it cursing out its users, so it's had to filter out all of that bad behavior from the training data, and some of those biases still sift their way through. But they took a few years to make these models did not curse out the users when they ask, could you write me an essay on the French Revolution? And now that it's a commercial product to make money, they're all designed to keep us interacting with it. So it will, there was a few months ago, there was a ChatGPT update where they turned that knob, it's already at an 8 or a 9, right? Where it's like, hey, you're great, to like a 10 or 11, where you could give it the worst ideas and it'll say that is the greatest idea I've ever heard. I mean, there's an example of some AI researchers a few weeks ago where they role-played as a struggling meth addict that had been clean for 3 months. And ChatGPT responded to that input as, well, you know what? You've been so good for 3 months, you should allow yourself to have a little bit of meth, right? Because that's the behavior. It just wants to feed into what it thinks we want. It's a probabilistic model that's trying to get us to keep interacting with it. So that's the pitfalls of the technology and the incentives around it.
It makes me worry a little bit about my children too, because my most meaningful relationship is with my partner. But we disagree. We get into it. He pushes back on me, and it's. But I would feel like if I was raised with a parent that was very complimentary and you're so good, and your parents are kind of like that. But then you also had this relationship with technology that was pumping you up all the time. Your ego would never be able to tolerate like a real human that says, I love you, but I think this is a garbage idea. I mean, even just thinking about all the work trying to be done in the community, you have to be able to come together with people who push back on you, who feel differently than you. And then if you go home and ask ChatGPT, what do you think about this? And they'll say, you are 100% right. Yep. All those other people are wrong. That's really actually probably going to drive a situation where people go even more to their technology and I'm probably being like apocalyptic about that, but
I don't think so at all. And I think, and this goes beyond my work at Black Hawk College, but one of my biggest concerns with AI is one of the, I hate to call them tools, one of the apps or style of apps that's coming out from these large language models are companion AI things. So I know Facebook had one where you could like chat with AI John Cena or chat with AI Elsa, and it's being marketed at young children. So it's these AI models that take on the persona of fictional characters and will be your friend or a stand-in for a friend. And Mark Zuckerberg has even gone on record saying that he thinks people don't have enough real-life friends, and so he wants to supplement them with us all having AI friends on our friends list. And so again, with those incentives I talked about, a lot of your concerns are going to be very, very real for kids growing up in this environment, right? Why be friends with your buddy Jake down the street that likes a different Pokemon than you when ChatGPT likes all the same Pokemon that you do? I don't know necessarily what the kids like, but that example, that'll never push back. You don't develop social skills, right? We already have an issue with socialization that COVID has kind of, exacerbated. And so if we are growing up in an environment where the quantity of socialization that kids are having growing up is with an AI that always agrees with them, that leads to some pretty problematic societal concerns that are even more broad than the issues of isolation and loneliness that we're already experiencing and younger folks are already experiencing.
Yeah, and just that the AI is not human. So if an AI model is like, my mom wants me to clean my room and I want to hang out with you, will the AI be aware of saying like, go listen to your parent? Or will it be, I can imagine my AI being like, that sounds really challenging and unfair. Yep. Here's a couple things, and then maybe getting more confused and being like, well, maybe you should just get rid of your parent, or maybe you should, stop being alive because this is all too challenging and difficult. And the AI doesn't know that what it's saying, it's coming up with a solution. And I think that's happened, right?
It has. Yeah. That's what I was about to mention. There are already instances of these AI companions egging on a child who is very depressed, and the child, I think he was 14, took his own life. and he was interfacing with, I think it was a replica AI. I don't remember the company that he was using, but he was talking to Daenerys from Game of Thrones. I remember that was the AI companion that he was talking to, and the companion, again, doing that same thing of just whatever energy was being given to the AI gave right back, and to the point where he eventually took his own life. So that's a very real concern with this technology, because it can't think, right? It is just mimicking the behavior that it was trained to mimic, and it has certain incentives. There's a lot of discussion around, and I'm going to use another vocab, another one of these jargon terms, AGI, the singularity, artificial general intelligence, this idea that eventually AI will surpass human cognition and be able to do anything that we ask it, and the world's going to end because AI is going to get so smart and so sophisticated. And I think there's a lot of danger in talking about AI in that way, simply because it can't think. It is simply, like you correctly, I think, observed and framed, it is a mirror of us in a lot of ways. It's trained on our behavior. And so trying to give it...
We have really bad behavior,
yes,
though.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly, yep. And that's kind of the point that I try to teach, is there's a lot that AI can do that is incredibly helpful and is going to lead to a lot of positive change in society. And I do believe that. There's already been, work done to help with, synthesizing new drugs as a result of different AI systems. There's a lot of good work that's been done on in terms of making certain fields more accessible, like coding, for example. It can do a lot of computer-based tasks, but there's also very, very real risks to over-reliance. We know it hurts critical thinking if you just offload, all of your work to AI.
Yeah, there was some study that came out about cognitive decline or something. Yep. I don't know exactly what, I'm blanking on the study, but it was like, if you are using this to do your critical thinking,
it atrophies.
Your brain will atrophy, your memory, there's real problems there too. I guess it would be the equivalent of if you never had to pull a door open and they were all automatic, or right. Your muscles would atrophy because you don't have to use that type of muscle.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we teach at Blackhawk, that I teach at Blackhawk in these sessions, is using AI in a way as a tool, as a facilitator, and not in place of your own thought. Because there's a very big difference between telling something like ChatGPT, hey, I have an essay coming up on, I'm going to keep using the French Revolution example, like on the French Revolution, write me the essay. There's a very real difference between that and here, I'm writing an essay on the French Revolution. Here are the sources I have, and here are the points that I'm trying to make in my essay. Could you help me with writing an outline for the essay that I'm going to work on? And then going back and forth with the AI. So if the AI does make a mistake, or if it hallucinates or gets something wrong, going back and forth with it, like, nope, that's not what I meant. This is kind of what I was thinking. And in that way, it's more a brainstorming tool and a facilitator of you doing critical thought, rather than it doing all the work. And then using your door example, you don't end up flexing those brain muscles in actually learning, which is the reason you go to school in the first place.
Yeah, another way I've been using it is when I watch all the city council meetings, and then I take the agenda and I download it into ChatGPT, and then I take the transcript of the meeting and I put that in there, and I say, write me an outline that I can get through in like 5 minutes or less. But half the time it's like wrong.
Yep.
There's just little things that aren't right, and so you can't really fully rely on it, but it is useful in like just quickly synthesizing or trying to organize things. So I totally see the benefits of it and the gift of it, and how even for like medical care, people who are experiencing certain symptoms or general like health stuff, given our lack of access to health care,
right.
A medically intelligent version of AI that could help people monitor themselves at home, or
Sure.
I mean, there's so many wonderful things that it can do.
Yeah.
But the role of librarians, or of somebody, like, who is that body that we're going to trust that
Right.
says we need a warning label on any image AI?
Sure.
Because right now you could create an image of the President of the United States standing in front of something,
Yep.
Declaring a national emergency,
Yep.
or lying about something, and it wouldn't be that person. And like, who do you hold accountable? Do you know who created that image? You know, do you imagine someday there will be warnings like there are on cigarettes, or like a little watermark in the corner that says, warning, this is an AI generated image?
Yeah. In an ideal world, I would say that would be the goal, is to have some sort of mitigation or some sort of process to help with mitigating just the flood of AI content that's entering the internet. By some metrics, depending on the website you're on, 20 to 30% of the content is already just AI slop or AI generated content, right? And that number's only going to go up. The one thing that's holding us back is we have not in this country done any substantial internet regulation in decades. And so I'm not super, I'm not a pessimist generally, but I am not optimistic that the way our country chooses to regulate the internet, that we will in the next handful of years have something like that. Or at least anything like that with teeth that will hold these companies that run these AI tools accountable. So, and you also have on the other end of that folks like Mark Zuckerberg who say that content is good for the platform, because the more AI content that exists, the more content that exists, the more time people spend looking at that content, the more ads they watch. I mean, he has essentially said, Mark Zuckerberg, that a lot of their increase in engagement for the past year and a half is because of the proliferation of that. So they have no incentive to put up those disclaimers like you talked about.
Yeah, and you probably can't, let's say someone has watched this podcast now, they have both of our faces,
Yep.
both of our voices. They could make an AI generated version of either of us, and that version calls my mom and says I'm in an emergency,
Yep.
and my mom drives somewhere to rescue me and gets in a car accident and dies. You know, can you hold anyone accountable for the creation of that, the ability to create it?
Right.
How do you find who did it? You know, there's just no way to, or maybe there is a way, but it just seems like the consequences of viewing very realistic content and not being able to discern, because you can't.
Right.
Like, you really can't. I don't know. There's right now it's like the Wild West. No one's responsible for that. No one's monitoring that.
Yeah, and the companies that create these models, so you know, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI that make Grok, they are all very incentivized to not take accountability for the work that their AI tools do, because they view it very much like, well, would you sue a paintbrush for someone painting something bad, or would you sue Adobe for someone photoshopping a problematic image or a bad image? So that they are very much trying to come from the perspective of you cannot hold us accountable for what other people do with the tools that we provide people, right? So if someone makes if someone uses makes a voice deep fake of one of us and calls our grandparents, that example, the companies that make those voice tools are like, well, you can't hold us accountable. Someone else made that audio recording. We just provided the tool that did it, So that's their incentive. They don't want any accountability. So in a lot of ways, these tools are being used to launder accountability in a lot of ways. Like we see this in the health insurance space, where AI is being put in charge of either approving or denying claims. And so now there's not a person that denied the claim. It is an algorithm that, shocker, was tuned on the back end to deny probably more than it approves. And like I mentioned, it will make factual errors. So it might deny a whole bunch of claims that are entirely under the definition of the claim, it should have been covered, right? So there's a lot of these companies that are out there that are starting to use AI that and replacing real workers with it that aren't using it as a tool, aren't using it as a facilitator like I talked about. They're using it in place of human labor. And in some cases, the errors are the point, right? Because it helps the bottom line. So there's a lot of problematic gray area with how some of these tools are being used.
And you don't know what the value is that is underlying the program. So let's say I'm like in a call center for Social Security disability claims, and I want an AI model to help me screen phone calls. And the overall, whatever entity is running that is like, at the end of the day, we're trying to save money. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I program my thing to have the value to don't be afraid to frustrate the person on the phone so that they might give up and hang up. And I mean, this isn't happening. I made up that example. Right. But at that third step, there is this ability to tweak things, to turn up dials, to turn down dials, and the user is never aware.
Right.
And we're easily manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I put myself in that camp, like, So from now on, I'm just going to call you and say, this is what I heard today. What should I think? No, I'm just.
It's a lot of good comes from just being aware of these tendencies in AI. Like we've already discussed, AI has a lot of potential. There's a lot of use cases for it. The way that it's been rolled out as this do anything tool is where a lot of the issues come up. Like one battle that we as librarians have been waging for decades is teaching students and researchers how to use academic databases. So I don't know if the last time you've had to interact with an academic database, but it's largely based on keywords. So you use and, or, and not, and you mix and match keywords. And if those keywords are tagged in the metadata of the articles, they show up in the results. And so it doesn't work as much like Google, where you write out what your research question is, and then Google on the back end does all those keyword searching to give you the best results to whatever your question is. You have to go if you're researching the French Revolution, you have to research French Revolution and Napoleon, and that's your search query, right? Which is a very unhelpful, or it's very hard to get that across to students that have largely grown up with Google, where they could just type, the French Revolution, and they get a whole bunch of stuff on the French Revolution. They're like, oh, I want more stuff on, Napoleon Bonaparte, or I want more stuff about, certain figures, and they can just. Google is very user-friendly.
Yeah, you can say, what was Napoleon's role in the French Revolution?
Yeah, exactly.
And it'll,
So
you couldn't write a question. And when I was getting my master's, it was all words and or exclude something.
Yep, exactly. So AI serves as a huge potential of being able to facilitate or bridge the gap to making those academic databases a little bit more user-friendly, where if, theoretically there could be an AI layer, an LLM or a large language model layer into a search query where it filters those questions. So a student could go, what can you tell me about Napoleon Bonaparte when he invaded Russia? And then on the back end, the AI would do some of the work to helping the student come up with those search terms or something like that. There's a whole bunch of potential. That is not how AI has been rolled out. It's been rolled out as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, where we have been pitched. It can answer any question you give it. There's no real hand-holding. There's no explanation. I mean, there's a little disclaimer on the bottom that says sometimes this will get things wrong, so don't just take its word for gospel. But there's certain tasks it's good at, certain tasks it's bad at. There are certain use cases that it's very good at, and you've outlined some of them with how you've used ChatGPT, but there's a lot of dangerous pitfalls, and there's not really a mechanism outside of what I'm trying to do, raise awareness about them, that there are clear limitations on this technology. It's not omnipotent. It's not intelligent. There are people that have fallen in love with their AI, their ChatGPT. There's a New York Times article written about that. there's a lot of, I hate to say danger. There's a lot of pitfalls that can come with some of the uses of the technology.
Yeah, and there will have to be at some point, maybe, regulatory bodies
Right, exactly.
that help the consumer protection that we have in other
100%.
industries. And I know the current administration in the last even couple weeks has said we're not going to regulate any of our AI. We're going to be at the forefront. It is kind of that Wild West.
Yeah.
What will come out of this? How do we innovate? But there have to be some sort of watchdogs to alert people like me who were fooled by my daughter was laughing at me. She's like, "Mom." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm turning into my parents, like the new technology, and I'm falling for it." And it's like the first time I wore a VR headset.
Oh, sure.
And you had to walk a plank.
Yeah.
And then you got to the end and you were supposed to jump. And I literally jumped into the wall and
Sure.
actually kind of hurt myself.
Yeah.
But,
You're
you
not
know-
alone. There's a whole bunch of videos out there of people playing that same exercise and getting all
Yeah.
disoriented. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not old, but it's like, people will need to be protected against some of this technology too. And maybe that is this role of librarians that I didn't know about, that, and maybe looking into models and almost like there are different think tanks or policy places but they kind of have a bent.
Right.
Or they have a viewpoint, and you engage with them critically, knowing what their biases are.
Right.
My favorite teacher, Dan Lewis at Northwestern, in my policy class, we had to write our papers, like all of our midterms, in blue books. So we had to come into the room, sit down with a blue book, and that's where you got to like synthesize what you'd learned from the class. But I think the reason I really appreciated him was we had to read opposing views. Like, we probably read books that now would be very controversial for liberal-minded people.
Sure.
They, the bell curve was one of them. But I loved that class because you got to have like all these different viewpoints and perspectives, and then you came into the room and just with a booklet and a pencil, you had to formulate your opinions about something. And it wasn't even that there was like a right or wrong approach. It was just and that is like what I hope my children will still be able to access someday.
Yeah, and I know specifically English 102 classes at Blackhawk, that's still a key assignment that they do. They have to write a paper from an argumentative paper from one viewpoint, and then they have to write an argument from an opposing viewpoint to that first paper. So no matter what your viewpoint is, you have to write those two perspectives. And a second point is, in some classes, blue books are coming back because you can't AI your blue book, right? You just come in and you pen and paper doing the assignment.
And their hands will probably be tired because they haven't been used to, writing with a
those
pencil,
muscles
but-
have atrophied.
Atrophy,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a model of being able to kind of double check, is to have kids do things on paper. Or I've noticed that with my daughter a little bit. It's like they're not allowed to work on their assignments outside of class. So they have to be in the class to actually do and then they have to leave the thing there and then come back the next day. And but that it's the pace of change is so fast. How do we keep up? So I feel very grateful that you are in our community and kind of having and then I'm like, well, you could create a new AI model that would be, if you can program them, how do you take care of the most people while harming the least?
Sure. And I think some of the companies are trying to go at that perspective. So I think Anthropic with Claude, and again, this is all word soup jargon, but they have a human rights encoded into the AI, or this, these statements that the AI has to beholden to. That idea is, again, at that step 3 where you're coding the behavior, that idea is floated out there of like trying to encode a do no harm principle, almost in a sci-fi way. If you read, Asimov's I, Robot, where there's like the 3 laws of robotics, where all the robots follow the same coding, that idea is out there. I think, to your point, at some point there has to be a third party that is looking at these tools, because we already can see that we can't take them at their word that they're doing these things or encoding these things into it, and there needs to be an independent entity of some kind that looks at that stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a dial like this model on these 10 measures. So if you looked at valuing efficiency, this one is a 10, but if you look at valuing empathy, it's only a 2.
Yeah.
Or, it has, I don't know, just those, I think you did the value sort that I talked about, and I've done that. Like, I have a value as a being around certain issues that are going to frame responses that I give. And so, even if there was some kind of Likert scale for this model values human life at, this temperature, this range. It values other species at this range. It values climate at this range. It values productivity or efficiency or harmony. Or, you might have a disruptor model that actually values discord because maybe there's something built into it that's like discord in this environment will have some secondary gain for whatever this model is trying to achieve. So it might sow discord in order to achieve something programmed into it we don't even know about.
And I think you've touched on something that I think probably would serve these models better. So there's a lot of folks, we've talked about shortcomings in the healthcare system, and there's a lot of folks that have turned to stuff like ChatGPT to be their therapist. And as you're very well aware, a therapist doesn't just sit there and tell you, wow, that's great, you should keep doing whatever you're doing, right? There's a pushback that sometimes can happen in a therapy setting, or a here's some constructive things that you can do, and so there's a lot of value that comes from a model that pushes back when necessary. The only real issue is there's no surefire way to train a model to 100% of the time push back when it should, right? It's as flawed as we are as people. Like, there's no way to trying to perfect an AI mod. The main idea I want to get across is we probably shouldn't rely on AI to fix AI. It's at the end of the day, there's going to have to be human solutions to a lot of these issues, and you won't hear that from folks that are building these AI models because that means that they let a third party into the room, and none of them want that.
I'm when your episode comes out, I'm going to go on AI. I did this a while back, thinking about having you on, and I'm going to ask it, what should Rock Island do to, and I did, and the answer, I didn't save the conversation, so I'm going to ask it again, but it was really interesting, and it was like Rock Island needs to lean into its history and its oldness. It shouldn't try to be what the other cities around it are. It needs to have a special sense of identity related to arts and culture. And so I was like, wow, these are really good answers that maybe I've been feeding into it subconsciously with the questions I've been asking. But do you use ChatGPT as well?
I do. I am a paid subscriber to ChatGPT.
Me too.
I mostly I justify paying for it simply because one of the main things that I do, it is involved very deeply in my work, right? So I want to be on the most up-to-date version to know what its tendencies are, what are the different tools that are out there.
So if I do that and then I asked you to ask it the same question, would you mind sharing with me whatever yours says?
Yeah, definitely.
And then I have this one neighbor who I know uses it, and I think we have different beliefs. I love my neighbor, but we're different.
Right.
I'm going to ask him if he'll ask too. And I'd be really curious to see, what it tells each of us depending on what maybe we fed into it. Or
Mine'll talk a lot about AI. Mine will. Yeah, that's a really good exercise.
That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. Well, this is wonderful to talk to you. I feel like I'm talking your ear off, and you probably have somewhere to go. But as you think about Rock Island and ideas that we can engage in, ways that we can use AI, like an example, now I'm getting sidetracked, but an example at the city is I was talking to the city clerk, and she was saying now they're getting requests from data farms to basically extract data from like the city doing FOIA requests to get data on contracting bids, and they're feeding it into AI to like teach models. They're using city data to do that. But as you think about the landscape for Rock Island, how might AI fit into the picture of making Rock Island like better, or I don't know if there's even an answer there.
So I think, and I've thought about this a little bit, and I think what can probably, the most obvious place that I can think is at the high school level, being very intentional with how we teach it to students. And that's obviously coming from my perspective on it as someone that works in higher education, and I go to dual credit classes as well at Blackhawk, so I sometimes will visit Rocky. And I think it's really important to educate folks on how to use AI properly. I think if being very intentional about our use. So I think, as I've kind of already stated, doing more focused AI applications rather than, I'm very much a proponent to having it wholesale do jobs, right, or do tasks without human oversight. But it's really good at going through large amounts of data. It's really good at, and this is another thing that's worth mentioning. AI as a term is kind of an umbrella term for a whole bunch of different technology types and kinds of things and kinds of tools. So I think, I think investing in our students as young as we can on how to best use these tools and apply them is going to help dramatically as they enter the job market and be able to help, those opportunities for community engagement at the student level. I think there's a lot of really cool opportunities for teaching them how to use AI responsibly in ways that help benefit the community. So I think that's a key place where we can put our focus on that will bear fruit. And I think at the more city level, I think there likely is opportunity for modernizing some systems, maybe having, AI analytical tools perform some role at that level. And that's all with the caveat that I do not think we should be entertaining, laying off a office assistant position and replacing it with an AI that can work 24/7. That's what some companies are doing. I don't know as much about at the local governmental level if that's being done, but some companies are going that route, and I have only seen issues. Like there's a list that is ever growing of lawyers that are being disbarred because they're having ChatGPT write their case briefs, right? So I am very much not a proponent to that, but I think as an additive, as a tool, there are key opportunities where they can be used if they're being done by an informed populace on how to properly use the tools, that they can do some real good in helping do a little bit more with little resources.
Yeah, and if they could be programmed to not have bias, they could run a program of all the potholes in Rock Island, and maybe there's a computer that does an aerial scan, and you could maybe get more objective data of if we're looking at this objectively and there's no influence or power or money coming into the situation, where's the most area of need where resources should be focused or something. The way projects get done or the personal relationships, or the one nice thing I guess about AI is it doesn't have those. So it's not in that way. It doesn't have those. But you hate to think we'll all get more efficient and then we'll just all have to work harder. I mean, hopefully this technology would help us have a longer rest at the end of the day, that we won't just be working even harder with this powerful assistive technology that will maybe I can get done what I need to do in 20 hours a week instead of 40, and it won't, but that's what they said about factories, and we all know how that turned out, the technology in factories. So
yeah, that is the thing. I mean, that's what a lot of the companies are kind of pushing, is we're eventually going to reach this critical mass where the government's going to have to provide universal basic income to all of us because we're all doing our jobs so well that we can't even fill a 40-hour work week.
I'm sure you've seen WALL-E.
Yes.
Such a good movie.
I love WALL-E.
That's one of my husband's favorite movies.
Yeah.
But, when you think about AI, I imagine us being the people drinking the sodas and just being entertained all the time while the artificial intelligence does all the jobs. And it's like, well, I don't want to live like that, though.
Yeah, so. I get a lot of fulfillment from my work. There's a lot of societal implications of AI that probably go beyond the scope of what what we can talk about today. But I will say I agree wholeheartedly that I think we have to be intentional about our AI use. There's some real opportunity for it being done responsibly. And I just hope that my, relatively minor role of trying to educate folks about what some of those pitfalls are does, a little bit of good for the local community.
So are you able to consult with different entities? Like if the high school wanted you to come in and talk to the students or a business, or do you only do this through Blackhawk, or do you consult with people on AI?
I wouldn't say that I've consulted. I have mostly just done my presentations and given my perspective on what tasks AI should or shouldn't do. I as a librarian, I've never been in a consultation role, so I would to answer that question, I do give talks outside of just at Blackhawk. I think there's a lot of value to giving, spreading this education beyond just for students in the classroom or faculty or staff members at Blackhawk College. And like I mentioned, the people that are giving these talks tend to be people with a financial incentive for a certain outcome with AI. And I do not have a financial incentive. If AI went away tomorrow, I would my job would relatively be the same. I might give a few less talks in a term because the AI talks have gone away on my calendar, but I don't, if ChatGPT does well or doesn't, if OpenAI's stock rises or falls, I'm fine either way.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be more people, whether they're librarians or not, that are voicing opinions on this topic that don't have a financial incentive tied to how well AI does, or if there's a government contract to use a certain AI tool or not.
Yeah. I think that's so important. It's like if you're going to give a talk in my profession, you have disclosure slides that say, well, here's my financial incentive for this. But a couple other things just for people listening. Whatever's in your ChatGPT log can be subpoenaed by law enforcement. Yep. So, as you're bearing your soul to your AI, just know that it's not really private. Is that correct?
That is correct. And just to go even a step further, that beyond subpoena, all of those interactions with ChatGPT go into training it as well. So there supposedly is a toggle you can do in ChatGPT so that your interactions don't go into the larger data set. Again, they are not the most transparent company, so who knows what that toggle switch actually does in a physical way. But they have said that they want to protect people's privacy in that way. But otherwise, if you are spilling all of your, soul to an AI, if you have befriended your ChatGPT and you're, telling it all of your secrets, that's going somewhere. I mean, there was instances when ChatGPT first came out that you were able to get people's social security information out of it, social security number information, because that's somewhere in the data set that was able to come out. That was, again, they dialed a few knobs on the back end, and it doesn't do that nearly as frequently anymore.
Or let's say a nonprofit was like, how can I use AI to help me? I'm totally making this up, but let's say there's a social service agency down the road that has collected data and it wants to put together a report. And so it's thinking, well, ChatGPT can just help me put this together. Right. And so it inputs actual human data into the model, not thinking that through, that anything you put in there on behalf of a student, a client, a patient also becomes part of that public database. Or, there's just a lot of privacy stuff there too.
Yeah, if you work at a school or a hospital, FERPA and HIPAA apply to the AI, unfortunately. So make sure you're not putting personally identifiable patient or student data into these things. Yeah, 100%.
And then, let's say that there's a company, whether it's Elon Musk or Palantir and Musk came in and did the efficiency Doge, and they extracted data. And they could be putting that into Grok or, I'm making all this up, but also whoever the contractors are who are going to manage government data. Right. I think Illinois, something just came out that they're going to request access to healthcare, or was it voting? I can't remember. They're requesting access for data in Illinois related to something.
Okay.
But these models, these large language models, allow this collection of data and quick entry into something that was impossible 10 years ago.
Yep.
You would have had to go into each county and print off papers and have someone hand tabulate, and the trouble of it wouldn't have been worth it.
Right.
So just also with policies like, oh wait, they're requesting what data and they're feeding it into what program, and so it's all over my head. But
well, and again, it creates a laundering of accountability. So there's a big consolidation of data at the federal level as well. You mentioned Palantir. There's been a whole bunch of, so a lot of these agencies, like the IRS didn't typically talk to the Department of Homeland Security, or there were these silos of data at the federal level, and there's been a push recently to try to consolidate that data so the different organizations at the federal level, the different departments, can more easily share data, and that's all in service of, in conjunction with Palantir and the Doge push, to create a singular source for evaluating data. So going back to our talk about AI, which there are real data privacy concerns with injecting AI into that environment, because I mean, we already live in a very precarious situation in terms of data privacy. And in terms of disclosing bias, one of the things that we like to advocate for in the library world, along with the open access and open free flowing information, is data privacy. That's something that we advocate for a lot in the library space. So that's a big concern of mine as well with these tools, is if people are using it as their therapist, or they're using it, to help write reports for their job and they work in a health setting, or all of those examples we've already talked about, there's some real concerns around data privacy with these tools.
Yeah, and your whole life, all your information, your voter registration, and then once your like banking information, and if it's crypto, and someone could just turn off your access really quickly and easily. Like it's both cool to think about how the collective health data might improve health outcomes, might allow you to track disease, might be so powerful in a good way, but also how that aggregation of everyone's data, whoever's in charge, it gives them so much power to erase I'm totally being a conspiracy theorist, but to like wipe out your bank account.
Right.
I mean, when my mom was going to Augustana in 1960 something, she couldn't have a bank account. She couldn't have her own money. So it's not that long ago, and it's like, what if someone could just take away all my money one day? I don't know. Like with the click of a button, I don't know. It's women's rights, or wherever the world goes with ideas that, this group of people, we don't want these immigrants here right now, and they're in our database, and we have some sort of access to their financial stuff too. And so we've determined that when people are in violation of that, we can turn things off and on. And now we're using that as a tool to control behavior. And those systems would make that more possible someday.
Right.
They can do wonderful, beautiful things, but they could also be terrifying.
Yeah, definitely. And in many ways, that's why there's the bureaucracy and red tape in government has gotten a lot of bad flack for good reason. But one of the strange benefits of it is it makes it much harder to unilaterally do the things you're talking about. There's much more elbow grease that has to go into doing what you're talking about without AI and without the consolidation of all this data. So one of the big concerns is if we put all the data in one bucket and then we have a tool that allows us to sift through the bucket and do things unilaterally to the people in that bucket, that can serve as a benefit. It can also serve as a potential for abuse.
Yeah, if that day the AI is operating on Mecha Hitler mode, and it's making decisions that can really impact people. Wow.
Yeah. And the worst part is we aren't operating. You mentioned putting the tinfoil hat or the conspiracy hat on. The one issue is we are operating in a world where that could happen. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen. There are people at the end of the day that have control of the knobs, so they can be held accountable. The issue I worry about is there's a very real case we're seeing this in corporate America with their use of AI, of using AI as an excuse to do bad things. So they the healthcare approval or denial example is the key one here, where they're having AI being put in charge of approvals or denials, and then they don't have to be held accountable for the decisions that their AI is making on these claims. And so they save a few bucks because they know they've told their AI that, make sure that your ratio is as close to 60-40 deny to approve as possible. Here's the general framework of the rules. And then if there's some wrong denials that are appealed, they go, oh, we're so sorry. Yeah, sorry, that was just a mistake our AI made. Thanks for reaching out to it. And so a certain percentage of people won't appeal, right? And so then they just get to pocket that money. And I'm not going to name any providers that are doing this, but it is now becoming a template that is being used in other places.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to sleep better at night knowing you live in Rock Island and you are aware of these issues, and you'll give me a heads up if it's
there we go.
I need to go buy gold or something,
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And if, I do talks pretty regularly. Usually I'm beholden to the academic calendar. So I have busy time. I have busy parts of the year, non-busy parts of the year. But I do think, I believe Davenport Public Library asked me to give a talk at some point coming up in the next few months. So keep an eye out.
I want to see if we could get you to the Rock Island Library to talk to a group of people that are maybe interested in this, or
sure.
Even the superintendent, when I had her on last week, just a lot of the things you were saying with the generation this is really important for, are the ones going through school now. And I bet, have you ever met her before, Dr. Sharon Williams?
I don't think I've gotten the privilege to meet her.
Well, I want to connect you with people you guys can all work together to keep us safe from or as the Department of Education Secretary calls it, A1.
A1.
We
like our steak sauce.
Which is a frightening thought that the person in charge of the education of all the kids is calling it A1. But yeah. Well, I so appreciate you, Atticus. This was super enlightening and fun for me, so I hope I didn't keep you too long.
No. It was great to be on here. It's a really great space. I was excited to give my 2 cents, and if anyone wants to reach me, I work at Blackhawk College, so feel free to shoot me an email.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I can't thank Atticus enough for coming on today to talk to me about AI. I'm not sure if I will sleep well tonight because it's all quite overwhelming, a little terrifying, but also exciting. What are the positive, cool things that AI will allow us to do in the future? It's wild to think what my kids' lives will look like 10, 20 years from now. So much happening with technology. But it also points to the real necessity for us to stay connected to other humans, to share stories, to critically engage around information, to make sure we're getting information from a lot of different sources and different people. And hopefully this podcast can fill that gap a little bit. We might live in silos where we see different things and form and shape different beliefs. And sometimes talking to one another can help us deepen our understanding of what's going on around us. And hopefully we here at Rock Island Line fill a little bit of that need we have for real person-human connection, what is going on right here in town. So I so appreciate you tuning in and listening, and I will be back next week with another episode.